He opened his mouth and blew great blue flames of fire into Lucy's face and burned her. She fell to the ground and he jumped away and ran off. Welcome to Friday Night Ghost Frights on Haunted Road Media. I'm Mike Ricksecker. Explore with us. Supernatural tale or urban legend? When the stories arise out of the 1800s, that makes it even more difficult to discern. 19th century England was rife with mystery, and one of those over the decades was that of Spring-Heeled Jack. Spring-Heeled Jack was a human-like cloaked figure with pointed ears and talon-like claws. He had protruding eyes that glowed. He also spat fire out of his mouth and could make giant leaps over walls and buildings. Now you're probably thinking right away, hey Mike, given this description, it's obviously an urban legend. But the reports and claims that come out of that day and the number of witnesses make you think otherwise. There may actually be something there. Let's take a look. The first report of Spring-Heeled Jack was in February 1838 by the Scale sisters, Lucy and Margaret. They were walking home one night after visiting their older brother, and all of a sudden this figure jumped out at them carrying a small lantern and blocking them from Green Dragon Alley. Without saying a single word, he opened his mouth and blew great blue flames of fire into Lucy's face and burned her. She fell to the ground and he jumped away and ran off. She was in a spasm of fear for hours on afterward. Well, 2 nights later, a young 18-year-old woman by the name of Jane Alsop answered the bell that had rung at the door. She opened it, and across the way was this tall, thin, shadowed figure who was asking for a light. He was claiming that he had captured the famed Spring-Heeled Jack from 2 nights beforehand, and she thought this was a policeman. When she brought him out a lit candle, she was in for a great shock. This is what the local newspaper actually reported. He threw off his outer garment and, applying the lighted candle to his breast, presented a most hideous and frightful appearance, and vomited forth a quantity of blue and white flame from his mouth, and his eyes resembled red balls of fire. He wore a large helmet, and his dress, which appeared to fit him very tight, seemed to her to resemble white oilskin. But Spring-Heeled Jack wasn't done with Jane. He reached out for her with his talons, ripped her dress, scratched up her arms and her neck. She was screaming in pain and terror and tried to run away. He caught her at the door after she had passed through the gate and started ripping out clumps of her hair. Well, Jane's sisters were alerted to what was going on with all the screaming that she was doing, and they ran out the front door and were able to pry Jane away from Spring-Heeled Jack. Even though the 3 young women fled inside and slammed the door behind them, of course locking it, Spring-Heeled Jack still didn't go away. They ran upstairs in fear that he was going to break down the door and come in after them. Fortunately, a policeman had heard their screams and came over to see what was going on. When he saw the policeman, Spring-Heeled Jack started jumping away, and of course, he got away. But right there in that small tale are 3 witnesses to corroborate Jane's story. Her 2 sisters and a police officer, the one that actually scared off Spring-Heeled Jack. It's also said that he dropped his cloak while jumping away from this incident, but no one knows whatever happened to that cloak. Unfortunately, in 1845, Jack's attacks got worse. Although up to this point, they had just been terrifying reports of him scaring people. Maybe there was some dress ripping and scratching and, just being very, very creepy and blowing blue flames. He hadn't actually killed anyone up to this point, but all that changed. At that time, Jacob's Island in Bermondsey was a sleazy slum with all kinds of decaying houses and a marsh. There was the smell of death and decay everywhere. Filth littered the streets, and people were constantly growing sick. This is the backdrop of Jack's attack on a 13-year-old girl named Maria Davis. She was walking along a bridge over a particularly nasty marsh that was called Folly's Ditch, when Jack suddenly jumped out at her. Again, he did his typical blowing of the blue flames right into her face. But then he did something a little different. He picked up the girl and threw her off the bridge into the murky marsh below, which sucked her right into it. The marsh sucked her down, and there was nothing that the onlookers who witnessed this could actually do. When the police came, they sifted through the muck to find her corpse. Of course, Jack had just bounded away as he had during the other incidents. The Lord Mayor of London, Sir John Cowan, had received many complaints about Spring-Heeled Jack, and he did address what was going on, although he was very skeptical. He was one of two minds of the situation. Either one, it was all a great exaggeration, or two, the ghost performed the feats of the devil upon the earth. In the 1870s at the Aldershot Army Barracks, there was a sentry who was actually attacked by Spring-Heeled Jack. Spring-Heeled Jack jumped out at him, actually just slapped his face. The sentry proceeded to pull out his rifle and shoot at Spring-Heeled Jack, but either missed, shot blanks, or, as the story goes, they had no effect whatsoever on Spring-Heeled Jack. Of course, again, Spring-Heeled Jack bounced away. Because of this report by the sentries on duty, everybody was alerted and they were ordered to further shoot the night terror on sight should they cross him again. Around that time in the 1870s, Spring-Heeled Jack was also seen in Lincolnshire and Liverpool. And the last sighting of him was actually in 1904. So it seems that Spring-Heeled Jack aged quite well. Spring-Heeled Jack was never actually identified as anyone in particular, but he was rumored for a while to be Henry the Marquis of Waterford, just because of his sick and sadistic humor. Henry also had the protruding eyes that was claimed to be a feature of Spring-Heeled Jack, and he lived in and around the areas of many of the sightings of the creature. However, Henry died in 1859, and reports of Spring-Heeled Jack kept cropping up over the decades. Some still insisted that it must have been a human that had actually taken on the role of Spring-Heeled Jack and terrorized these people that night. After all, there were so many witnesses to many of these attacks, and there were those, like the Alsop sisters, that actually pulled their sister away from the creature's grasp. So how would a normal human make some of these jumps over walls, over buildings, that it was said that Jack made? Many said it must be springs loaded into his boots. Well, German soldiers during World War II actually made the attempt of fastening springs to their boots to make these sort of jumps. Almost every single one of them broke their ankles. So if Spring-Heeled Jack wasn't human, then what was he? If he was a he. Because some do speculate that he may have come from some other world or another dimension. It's a mystery that has lived on now for over 175 years. Thank you for watching Friday Night Ghost Frights. Please let us know what you think of our show in the comments below. And if you have not yet, please subscribe. I'm Mike Ricksecker. Until next Friday night.